Ahoy! If you've been around the internet lately, you may have heard about a bill that would make it so that streaming copyright material could get you into jail. And this was talked about initially as something that could possibly happen if you stream music on Twitch, for example. I didn't pay too much attention to that. I didn't follow it too closely. I didn't look into it too much because I didn't expect it to go through in that state anyways. And obviously, there's been a fair bit of discussion about it, but what I didn't realize at the time is that this is part of the virus relief bill for America. So this was basically discussed along with how much money people will be getting for the suffering they endured this year, even though it has nothing to do with that, like many other things that were slipped in there. And now this bill is actually signed, and this particular aspect about streaming is part of that bill. And I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to look into that a little bit because I was relatively surprised that it even got in the first place and that it got through, and wanted to see what the specifics are and if this really means something for streamers. So the bill itself is now for $600, not for $2,000. That's still in discussion, but that's something for another time. I don't think it'll go through. It would be very, very fortunate if it does. It's probably just going to be the 600. And because it went through, because it's signed, there is also this additional law in there, such as creating new criminal penalties, including prison time for violating copyright laws with online streaming. So I dug into that a little bit. I found an article from CNN Business, which basically says, yeah, you could technically get those 10 years in prison under the Protecting Lawful Streaming Act. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty horrible. What's going on with that? And I actually just looked up this law itself, the Protecting Lawful Streaming Act, and there's fortunately a Wikipedia article about it already that kind of summarizes it. And I'm going to read the first part here. The Protecting Lawful Streaming Act of 2020 is a United States law that makes it a felony to engage in large-scale streaming of copyright material. The bill was introduced by Senator Tom Tillis on December 10, which is crazy, right? It was introduced on December 10, and now it's already in place. Like, that's maybe a conversation for another time, but why can like laws like this be pushed through so easily in other bills? I think it's a horrible system that's allowed in so many places. It makes sense for some smaller things sometimes, but like not when you're talking about something this important. Anyways, background. Modern computer and information technology has sufficiently advanced, most notably around 2010, to allow streaming media to be an effective way of sharing content on the internet. This has unfortunately led to a large amount of copyright infringement through unlawful redistribution, commonly referred to as piracy. Piracy websites, typically running outside of the United States jurisdiction, are created to share copyrighted films and television shows for free without the consent of the copyright owners. So that's the first part, right? So they wanted to make a law against that. And that basically goes against the providers, not users, the providers of streaming websites where you could stream entire movies and so on. And this is something that I know a lot of lawmakers have been trying to get their hands on for a while, since it was such a loophole, because you weren't technically uploading, or like you were uploading it, but we were streaming it and not offering it for download. But the people who were streaming it could technically also download it. Funny enough, maybe a story for another time, but I got hit with a fine once for having for having, well, I think it's reseeded. It was like back the LimeWire days, basically. Reseeded a movie, which ironically, I wasn't even the one to download it. It was not me downloading it. It was not on my PC. And the only connection that I essentially had was that I knew the person, and the person that did it was using my home's internet. So we'll talk about that maybe another time. But at that point, I got hit with a fine for roughly 800 euros, so more than $1,000, and that was when the euro was stronger as well, I think, so quite a fair bit more, for redistributing for less than a minute. So it was just literally just a few seconds, and that was that much of a fine. So you can see why the lawmakers would want their hands on that, and especially the music companies would want their hands on that, because then you can get much larger portions of money out of the people who redistribute it via streaming. And I know that like you could also get prosecuted before this already. There were already like laws that you could be punished under, but it was a lot harder, obviously, especially if they're located somewhere else, the servers are somewhere else, and then it's also just streamed, not actually provided for download, and that just restricted how people could be fined for it or punished for it. And this basically raises the stakes here and makes it riskier for people to do that, even though it's already risky beforehand. But obviously, this was with a lot of backlash, and they have specified how exactly this is meant to work. So, the bill specifically targets commercial or for-profit websites that operate as digital transmission services that primarily function to stream copyrighted material without authorization of the copyright holders. One example of such a website is NFL Byte. The website provides the visitors with unauthorized sources that stream National Football League games for free. The NFL has taken NFL Byte to court through civil lawsuits and attempts to stop their streaming of full NFL games, but are unable to seek criminal charges due to the limitations of US copyright law. The bill adds to the Title 18 of the United States Code that would make operating these sites a criminal felony with a maximum penalty of up to 10 years imprisonment and additional fines if convicted. So more money. That's the part that's really important. They don't really care about putting people in jail as much as they just want to get the money out of them. This brings the act of offering such unauthorized streaming media at a large scale to the same scope of penalty as offering illegal downloads or physical copies of the same content, clothing the streaming media loophole. So basically what I just talked about, the same idea that is already executed if you're downloading or if you're offering downloads especially, but this time for things that are streamed. Tillis stated that the bill is tailored specifically to target the websites themselves and not those who may use the websites, nor those individuals who access pirated streams or unwittingly stream unauthorized copies of copyright works. Tillis' office on head tech team advocacy group Public Knowledge clarified that the bill was not aimed at video game live streamers or platforms like Twitch or their viewers. So that is a very important part, that this is not about Twitch at all. It is specifically about streaming or restreaming content without, using it for anything, but rather just to provide it to others in place of a download. So I don't really think this is going to change all too much. I don't think, I'm sure there's going to be some websites that will shut down, but those who took these risks beforehand were always in the know that they could end up being severely punished for it. So I don't think they will drastically change their ways, especially if they provide the restreams from other countries anyways to avoid US laws. And I don't think it's going to be easy to extract someone from some, I don't know, faraway country just for restreaming any kind of copyrighted content. Like, it's technically possible probably at that point, but I don't think anyone would be willing to go through that hassle rather than just shutting down the websites and punishing them if they ever come to the US. So the further text here basically specifies this again, that this is not meant to target Twitch, but rather just large companies. And Tillis assured those concerned that the bill was narrowly tailored towards commercial sites and would not criminalize individual users. He specifically stated that information in the American Prospect article was false and inaccurate, and the bill was drafted not to sweep anomalous practices by online service providers and good faith business disputes. So the problem with something like this is always, where does good faith end? How exactly do you specify that, and how will the law be applied? As long as it's just applied to those who just restream illegal copies, again, they knew the risk. They're taking that risk when they're doing something like that. If you know something is just blatantly illegal and you do it you're willing to take the bullet for it. But if somebody, say, was restreaming any kind of sports event that is played on Twitch on their own channel, they would technically still be breaking copyright if they're not allowed to restream it, which has happened quite a few times, like I think with the political debates as well and stuff like that. But it should technically not fall under this law, not by everything that has been specified. The question is, do you ultimately trust that to be executed in that way? Because I could easily see that companies would try and push further from this point and be like, okay, now that we have this established, let's go after that and that and that in regards to streaming next, which should fall under the same category anyways, because we feel like it does. And that's where things get really complicated. I think this bill in itself is actually not as problematic as it was presented to be. The problems could arise from anything that follows afterwards if more things try to get pushed through on the same level. And the problem that I have with that specifically is, again, that this bill is implemented into something completely different, rushed in last second, as probably many other policies that I'm not closely following. And because of the way it's done, there wasn't even much room for discussion about those things, about what happens if it's like, for example, what happens if a channel does the same thing but on Twitch? What if somebody constantly restreams movies on Twitch and for some reason Twitch doesn't catch them themselves and doesn't kick them out? Where would that fall under? It's still not as specific websites, but it would be commercial in a way, and it would still be on Twitch. Does that fall somewhere in between? What's going to happen to that? And those are things that need to be very clearly specified and discussed. And I don't think there's room to discuss that within a time span of 17 days. So I find the way this is handled very concerning, but that's just the state of how politics are enforced for the most part, unfortunately. Anyways, with that, I hope this clears up things a little bit regarding this whole bill and what's going on for streamers. It's not really going to change anything for anyone right now, at least. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful. If you're new to the channel, hit the sub button and maybe the bell. Now that, I hope to see you for the next one soon. SLOTH out.